Hello, would you like to read a book? This one is called Cinderella. Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived a kindly gentleman. He had a fine home and a lovely daughter named Cinderella. The man gave his daughter all that money could buy, but he felt that what she needed most was a mother. So he married a woman with 2 children of her own. Cinderella. Alas, the kindly gentleman soon died. Cinderella was left in the care of her stepmother, a cold woman who was jealous of Cinderella's charm and beauty. As the years passed, Cinderella's stepmother spoiled her 2 daughters. Anastasia and Drizella slept in large, lovely bedrooms and were given anything their hearts desired. Cinderella was given a tiny room in the attic. Her stepmother forced her to do laundry, serve meals, and clean the house. Still, Cinderella remained kind and gentle. She made friends with the birds who flew to her windowsill and cared for the mice who lived in her attic room. Every morning, Cinderella woke early and began her work. She gave her stepmother's cat, Lucifer, a bowl of milk. She fed grains to the chickens, and she served her stepmother and stepsisters their breakfast. One morning there was a knock at the door. It was the king's messenger. The king was throwing a royal ball that evening. His son, the prince, needed to find a wife. Every eligible maiden was to attend. "Why, that means I can go too," said Cinderella, exclaimed. Anastasia and Drizella laughed at her, but Cinderella's stepmother agreed to let her go to the ball if she finished her chores and found something suitable to wear. In the attic, Cinderella found a dress that had belonged to her mother. It was a bit old-fashioned, but Cinderella knew she could fix it. Just then, Cinderella's stepsisters called her. The dress would have to wait. All day long, Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters kept her busy. There were floors to scrub and dresses to mend, animals to feed and yards to sweep. Cinderella's animal friends knew she would never have time to fix her dress, and so they decided to fix it for her. With a stitch here and a fold there, they turned Cinderella's old dress into a beautiful ball gown. When Cinderella saw the dress, she could hardly believe her eyes. She quickly put it on, then hurried downstairs to join her stepsisters. But when they saw what she wore, I'm sorry, but when they saw that she wore a sash and beads that had once belonged to them, Anastasia and Drusilla ripped the gown to shreds. "Girls, girls," said the stepmother said, "that's enough. Hurry along. Good night, Cinderella." Sobbing, Cinderella ran into the garden. How could her dreams ever come true now? Suddenly, the garden filled with light. Cinderella looked up to see her fairy godmother. "Come now, dry those tears," the kind fairy said. "You can't go to the ball looking like that." With a wave of her wand, the fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a glittering coach and the mice into horses. Then she transformed Cinderella's rags into a lovely ball gown and gave her glass slippers for her tiny feet. "Remember," the fairy godmother warned Cinderella, "you'll only have until midnight. On the stroke of 12, the spell will be broken and everything will be as it was before." The ball was already underway when Cinderella entered. Without stopping to think, the prince hurried to her side. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. The prince offered Cinderella his hand, and the two began to dance. As the night wore on, the prince never left Cinderella's side. Soon the two were falling in love. Suddenly the clock began to strike 12. Cinderella raced out of the ballroom and down the grand staircase. "Wait," the prince called. "I don't even know your name. How will I find you?" As she neared the bottom of the stairs, one of Cinderella's glass slippers fell from her foot. But Cinderella just kept running. It was almost midnight. Cinderella leaped into her carriage and raced for home. But the spell was soon broken and everything was as it had been before. The carriage once again became a pumpkin and the white horses turned into 4 little mice. All that remained was one glass slipper. Cinderella moved the slipper from her foot and carefully carried it home. The next morning, when the king learned of Cinderella's disappearance, he was furious. "The prince is determined to marry none but the girl who fits this slipper," the Grand Duke told him. The king, eager for his son to marry, ordered the Grand Duke to try the glass slipper on every maiden in the kingdom until he found the one it fit. Meanwhile, at home, Cinderella could not stop smiling and humming to herself. The stepmother realized that Cinderella was the mysterious girl the prince had fallen in love with. When Cinderella's stepmother, heard that the king was looking for the owner of the slipper, she quickly locked the girl in her room. But Cinderella wasn't locked in for long. Her mouse friends stole the key and slipped it under her door. Soon the Grand Duke and his footmen arrived with the slipper. Anastasia and Drusilla tried to force their big feet into the tiny shoe, but it was no use. Just as the Grand Duke was about to leave, Cinderella appeared at the top of the stairs. "May I try it on?" she asked. The footman carried the slipper toward Cinderella, but the stepmother stuck out her cane and tripped him, and the slipper fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The Grand Duke was horrified. "The king!" he cried. "What will he say? What will he do?" "But I have the other slipper," Cinderella said with a smile, pulling the glass slipper from under her apron. The Grand Duke knelt before Cinderella and eased the slipper onto her dainty foot. It was a perfect fit. A royal wedding was quickly arranged, and Cinderella and the prince were married. Cinderella's dreams had come true at last, and she and her prince lived happily ever after.